My friend's older sister stopped me by the garage and said, "Get in. I'll explain." I didn't know my life was about to change. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon, the kind where the sunlight fell just right across the garage floor, dust motes dancing lazily in the warm beams. I was crouched by my friend's old hatchback, tools scattered around me, trying to figure out why the engine wouldn't start. My hands were smudged with grease, my shirt sticking slightly to my back from the heat. I thought I was alone, but then I heard the faintest click of the driveway gate. At first, I thought it was my friend coming back from the store, but the figure that appeared in the sunlight wasn't him. It was his sister, and not just any casual presence. She had this way of filling the space with quiet authority, the kind of presence that made you take a step back and notice her even before she said a word. She looked effortlessly elegant in a simple blouse and jeans, her hair catching the sunlight in warm highlights, her posture relaxed yet commanding. She stopped a few feet from me, arms crossed lightly, and gave me a small, knowing smile. "Get in," she said, her voice calm but firm, carrying a weight I didn't understand yet. "I'll explain." For a moment I froze. Her words were simple, but the way she said them, like she was letting me into a world I wasn't supposed to see, made my heart skip. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to comply out of politeness, curiosity, or sheer instinct. I hesitated, shifting my weight on the balls of my feet, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead, suddenly very aware of how greasy my hands looked. She didn't rush me. She simply waited, her gaze steady, almost challenging me without demanding anything. I could feel a subtle tension building between us, something that wasn't quite attraction yet, but something more than mere acquaintance. It was curiosity, trust, and an unspoken acknowledgement that whatever was about to happen, it would change the dynamic between us. The sun highlighted her features in a way that made her look both approachable and untouchable. There was warmth in her eyes, but also a shadow of urgency. Something pressing, something personal. I realized, almost instinctively, that she had chosen to involve me in something important. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. I slowly moved toward the car, feeling the gravel crunch beneath my shoes, acutely aware of the distance between us. 5 feet that suddenly felt like a chasm of anticipation. My hands tingled slightly as I brushed against the door handle, noticing for the first time the faint scent she carried. Something soft, floral, and intoxicatingly real. The moment felt suspended, like the world had narrowed down to just the two of us, with nothing else existing beyond this garage, this quiet afternoon, and the words she had just spoken. As I opened the door and slid into the passenger seat, I realized that this encounter, brief as it seemed, was the start of something that would quietly unravel my understanding of boundaries, desire, and trust. And even then, I didn't yet know just how much my life was about to change. The engine purred to life, and for a moment, the familiar hum of the car seemed almost too loud in the quiet afternoon. I glanced at her as she shifted into gear, her hands steady on the wheel, her posture casual yet deliberate. Every movement carried an ease that came from years of confidence, and yet there was a subtle tension in the set of her shoulders, a quiet urgency in the way she glanced at me from time to time. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, keeping my voice casual, though my heart was a little too fast. She gave me a brief, almost playful smirk, but her eyes were serious. "Yes, you need to understand." I swallowed, sliding the seatbelt over my shoulder. Somehow I trusted her, though I wasn't entirely sure why. The air between us was thick with unspoken questions. Why had she called me here? What was so important that she'd take the risk of involving me? And why did my pulse feel like it was trying to announce itself to the world? We drove through quiet streets, the afternoon light painting the car's interior in soft amber hues. Her voice broke the silence, calm but deliberate. "It's complicated," she began, and I noticed the slight hesitation, the way her fingers tightened around the steering wheel for just a second. "But I need you to hear it from me. No one else. Not your brother, not anyone. Just you." I nodded, leaning slightly forward. Something about her tone made it clear that this wasn't a casual conversation. It was a confession, a revelation, a trust extended to me in a way I hadn't expected. My chest tightened. I realized, almost painfully, that I was being invited into her world. An adult world of secrets, responsibilities, and vulnerabilities I wasn't fully prepared for. She handed me a small envelope, almost casually, but my fingers brushed hers as I took it. The contact was brief, electric in a quiet, understated way. I felt warmth lingering from her touch, and my stomach knotted with awareness. "You're probably wondering why I didn't tell anyone else," she said, eyes briefly meeting mine. "It's not that I don't trust people. It's just that I trust you." The words hung in the air, simple yet weighted with meaning. Trust, recognition, an acknowledgement of something unspoken between us. I found myself searching her face for signs of hesitation, signs that this was a test, but all I saw was sincerity. For the rest of the drive, the conversation unfolded like careful choreography. She shared the circumstances, personal, messy, tinged with vulnerability, but never demanded my judgment. I listened, offering small nods and quiet responses, feeling the strange thrill of being a confidant to someone so composed, so self-assured, yet evidently human in her fears and uncertainties. Every glance, every subtle shift of her body as she spoke, made the space in the car feel intimate and suspended. The ordinary act of driving became a vessel for connection, a slow, deliberate introduction into a world I had never known existed, and one I was suddenly desperate to understand. By the time she parked again, the envelope still in my hands, I realized two things. First, that she had changed the dynamic between us forever, and second, that I was no longer just the boy who knew her casually. I was part of something far more significant, and the quiet intensity of the ride had already begun to pull me in deeper than I had imagined possible. She parked a few blocks away from the house, near a quiet street lined with the early hints of evening light. The kind of street where the world seemed to slow down, where even the soft rustle of leaves felt amplified. I unbuckled my seatbelt, my movements careful, almost hesitant, as if making a misstep would shatter the fragile tension that had built in the car. She stepped out first, her presence immediately commanding the space. Even in the casual softness of a loose blouse and well-worn jeans, she radiated a quiet authority, the sort of confidence that made every movement seem effortless. When she turned to gesture for me to follow, I felt the familiar pull of curiosity, mixed with something sharper, something like awareness of her nearness. We walked side by side down the empty street. The sun was low, casting long golden shadows that stretched and intertwined across the pavement, and for a moment, the world outside felt like it had disappeared entirely. It wasn't just the street, the air, or the fading light. It was her. The way she moved, fluid but deliberate, like every step was considered yet natural. The slight sway of her hips, the way her hair caught the sunlight, the way her eyes flicked to mine and then away. Small, almost imperceptible gestures that made my chest tighten in ways I wasn't used to. She began talking again, softly this time, sharing a personal memory from her past. Something simple yet profoundly human, a quiet vulnerability that contrasted sharply with the poised exterior she usually carried. I listened, captivated, realizing that I was witnessing a side of her that few people ever did. Her voice carried a warmth, a quiet gravity, that made it impossible to look away, impossible to treat this as just a casual encounter. As she spoke, our hands brushed lightly, not intentionally, but in a way that lingered longer than an accident should. A spark of awareness ran up my arm, a subtle reminder that this was no ordinary interaction. Her fingers lingered against mine for the briefest moment, and I felt a thrill in the simplicity of it, in the quiet intimacy of sharing a small, unspoken connection. We stopped near a lamppost, the golden light casting a halo around her figure. She tilted her head slightly, a soft smile playing on her lips, as though she could see the questions running across my face without a word being spoken. I noticed the small details. The slight crease at the corner of her eyes, the warmth in her cheeks, the natural curve of her lips as she spoke. Every detail seemed amplified, every gesture magnified by the slow, deliberate pace of the moment. I realized then that this encounter was more than a casual drive or a shared secret. It was a quiet revelation, a moment suspended in time where we existed only for each other. And while the air between us was still charged with unspoken tension, it was no longer solely curiosity or intrigue. There was a tentative connection forming, fragile yet undeniable, built from trust, observation, and the subtle human details that made her entirely real and entirely captivating. By the time we continued walking, I understood that something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't just the boy and the older sister of a friend anymore. This was two people beginning to navigate a delicate, uncharted territory, each step forward carrying a mix of hesitation, fascination, and an undeniable pull toward one another. The afternoon was fading, the street bathed in a soft, honeyed glow that made everything feel warmer, quieter, more private. We had walked a few blocks from the car, and the tension that had been taut in the car and earlier moments outside the garage began to shift, just slightly, into something lighter. She had a way of making the weight of her revelations feel manageable, almost effortless, and I was slowly realizing that she could make the ordinary feel charged, and the charged feel ordinary, all at once. "You really have a talent for making a mess of things," she said suddenly, teasing, as I fumbled with my backpack, trying to get the envelope she had given me to sit properly without spilling its contents. Her lips curled into that effortless, knowing smile of hers, the kind that hinted she understood me better than I understood myself. I laughed, a little nervously, feeling the tight knot of tension in my chest loosen just enough. "Hey, it's not a talent. It's more of a curse," I replied, trying to match her playful tone while internally acutely aware of how close she was walking beside me. Every so often, the side of her arm brushed mine, and though accidental, the contact sent a subtle ripple of awareness through me. My stomach tightened slightly, not in fear but in that peculiar mix of curiosity, admiration, and something I couldn't name. She glanced at me, eyes bright with amusement, and tilted her head. "You know, it's kind of funny seeing you like this, serious, focused, and a little fumbling. I never thought of you that way." Her voice was soft, teasing, yet there was a warmth underneath, a subtle invitation to see her differently as well. For a moment, we walked in silence, and I noticed things I hadn't before. The faint scent of her perfume in the cool evening air, the way her hair moved with each step, the rhythm of her stride perfectly in sync with mine. There was a playful tension in the space between us, something unspoken yet entirely present. I realized that even in the teasing, even in the casual remarks, there was an intimacy developing, a shared space where vulnerability, humor, and desire began to coexist. She laughed lightly at something I said, and the sound lingered, soft and melodic, wrapping around the quiet street like a warmth I wanted to hold on to. I caught myself wanting to make her laugh more, to see that subtle smile, to linger in this teasing dance just a moment longer. The way she occasionally brushed a stray hair from her face, the way her eyes held mine for just a second longer than necessary. It all added layers to the unspoken connection between us. It was the kind of moment that felt like a secret, a pause in time where the world outside didn't exist, and only the quiet, playful tension between us mattered. Age, experience, and unspoken social boundaries felt like distant concepts. In this suspended space, it was just us. Two people learning, discovering, and testing the edges of something entirely new. As we continued walking, the teasing faded into shared glances, subtle smiles, and a mutual understanding that this connection was real. The slow-burn tension wasn't just about attraction anymore. It was about noticing, learning, and valuing each other in ways neither of us had anticipated. And in that quiet, golden moment, I realized that the playful ease she could bring into serious spaces was as intoxicating as it was unnerving, and I wanted more of it. The sky had deepened into the soft indigo of early evening, streetlights flickering on one by one as the world quieted around us. We were back in her car, parked in the corner of an empty lot, a space that felt entirely ours. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain from earlier, and it seemed to wrap us in a bubble where only the two of us existed. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged, heavy with the unspoken things neither of us dared say aloud. She leaned slightly forward to adjust the radio, and the movement brought her just a little closer. I caught the faint scent of her perfume again, soft and familiar, and felt a subtle warmth from the brief brush of her arm against mine. My pulse quickened, awareness sharpening with every small gesture, every unspoken cue. It was the kind of tension that made the simplest acts, breathing, looking, shifting in the seat, feel deliberate, almost significant. "Do you ever think about things differently?" she asked suddenly, her voice quieter than before, almost intimate. Her eyes, usually so confident and composed, were softer now, holding a question that wasn't entirely verbalized. I swallowed hard, not entirely sure how to respond. My heart told me the answer before my mind did. "All the time," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "More than I probably should." Her lips curved into a faint, knowing smile, but it didn't ease the tension. If anything, it made it more acute. She reached for something in the center console, and our hands brushed again. This time, it lingered slightly longer, just enough for the warmth to register, enough for the electricity of the moment to hum through me. I wanted to pull back, out of caution, but part of me didn't want to. We sat like that for a long beat, the silence stretching in tandem with our unspoken desire. I could feel her awareness of me, the way she angled her body slightly, how her gaze softened and lingered on my face. I realized that we were both aware of the line hovering between us, the line that defined social boundaries, personal caution, and yet undeniable attraction. A small laugh escaped her, soft and light, breaking the intensity just enough to let me breathe. But the electricity remained, crackling beneath the surface. We were close enough that our shoulders brushed, our knees almost touched, and the space between us felt like it was charged with something neither of us could, or wanted to name. For a moment, I wanted to reach out, to let my hand rest on hers, to close the invisible gap that had been building for days. But I didn't. She didn't either. We were both caught in the exquisite tension of what could be, aware of the desire, aware of the hesitation, and aware that this fragile balance was something rare and precious. By the time she started the engine again, the moment had passed, but it didn't feel like a loss. Instead, it was a promise, a quiet acknowledgement that the connection between us had deepened, that the unspoken feelings were mutual, and that when the time came, neither of us would need words to understand the depth of what we were experiencing. The streetlights cast long, soft reflections on the damp pavement as we stepped out of the car. The city around us had quieted, leaving only the distant hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional murmur of a late passerby. It was a world reduced to the two of us, a private moment suspended in time. I realized, with a clarity that both thrilled and unnerved me, that the past few days, the ride, the walk, the playful teasing, the shared vulnerabilities, had changed everything. We stopped under a lone street lamp, the light softening her features and catching the subtle highlights in her hair. She turned to face me, and for the first time, I allowed myself to take in the full measure of her presence. Not just the older sister of my friend, not just the confident, composed woman I had admired from afar, but someone deeply human, layered, and profoundly alive. "I'm glad you stayed," she said quietly, her voice carrying a warmth I hadn't realized I had been craving. Even when I could have handled things alone. There was no reproach in her tone, no pressure, just honesty. I felt the weight of her trust, and it anchored me. "I'm glad too," I admitted, my voice low, unsteady, but sincere. I didn't want to walk away from this. From you." Her gaze softened, and she took a small, deliberate step closer. The space between us, once charged with hesitation and unspoken desire, felt different now, safe, intimate, filled with mutual acknowledgement. She extended a hand toward mine, and this time, I didn't hesitate. Our fingers intertwined, light but meaningful, the warmth of her hand grounding me in the present. We stood like that for a long beat, the silence filled not with tension but with understanding. There were no words needed to express the connection that had grown between us. The laughter, the teasing, the shared confidences, the quiet brushes of skin and glances that had said more than either of us could voice. It was a bond forged slowly, deliberately, in moments small and profound alike. Finally, she leaned forward slightly and pressed a gentle kiss to my cheek. A fleeting, tender gesture that felt like both an affirmation and a promise. I could feel the warmth of her lips, the softness of the contact lingering longer in my mind than in reality. I smiled, a quiet, relieved smile, knowing that this was the culmination of all the tension, hesitation, and subtle desire that had built between us. I don't know what comes next, she admitted, her voice just above a whisper. But I do know I'm glad we found this together. I nodded, squeezing her hand lightly. Neither do I, but I want to figure it out with you. We lingered for a few more moments under the soft street lamp glow, simply existing in the shared space, letting the world move around us without disrupting the fragile, beautiful connection we had cultivated. The future remained uncertain, but the present was ours, and that was enough. As we finally parted ways that evening, the warmth of her hand still etched in mine, I realized that this encounter, unexpected, charged, and slow-burning, had left an indelible mark on me. We hadn't resolved every question, every fear, every boundary, but we had acknowledged the bond, the mutual trust, and the undeniable spark. And sometimes that alone is the truest kind of resolution. If this story made your heart skip a beat, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another slow burn romance. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if you were in his shoes?